The small town of Pine Creek had its own heartbeat. It pulsed with the rhythm of farm machinery, pickup trucks on gravel roads, and high school football games on Friday nights. This wasn't a place where classical music flowed through people's veins. This was blue-collar country where folks worked hard with their hands and relaxed with country tunes on the radio. In this unlikely setting, Lena Rodriguez stood out like a delicate wildflower among weeds. Not because she tried to, in fact, she did everything possible to blend in. At 16, she wore the same style of faded jeans and simple t-shirts as her classmates. She kept her thick black hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and spoke softly, as if afraid her voice might draw unwanted attention. Her parents had crossed the border from Mexico before she was born, settling in Pine Creek because there was steady work in the apple orchards and vegetable farms that surrounded the town. They lived in a small rental house at the edge of town, the kind with thin walls that couldn't keep out the winter chill and windows that stuck in the summer humidity. "Lena, help your brother with his homework," her mother would call out in Spanish as she prepared dinner after a long day of picking fruits. Her father would come home with dirt embedded in the lines of his hands, too tired to do much more than eat and fall asleep in the living room chair. Lena never complained about her life. She understood the weight her parents carried. She knew that every dollar they earned went toward giving their children what they never had, a chance at something better. But deep inside, she carried a secret dream that felt almost shameful in its impracticality. The first time she saw a piano, Lena was 7 years old. The elementary school had received a donation, an old upright piano with yellowed keys and a scratch across its dark wooden side. The music teacher, Mrs. Wilson, had played a simple tune during assembly. The notes had floated through the air like nothing Lena had ever heard before. That night she had dreamed of touching those keys herself. "Can I stay during lunch break and try the piano?" she had asked Mrs. Wilson the next day. The teacher had looked surprised but nodded with a kind smile. "Just be careful with it, okay?" Lena's small fingers had pressed down on the keys, making harsh, random sounds at first, but even those awkward notes had sent a thrill through her body. Something about the piano called to her in a way she couldn't explain. For the next few years, she spent every free moment in the music room. Without formal lessons, she taught herself by watching videos on the school computers during library time and by trial and error. Her progress was slow but steady. By the time she reached high school, Lena could play simple tunes and was teaching herself to read sheet music borrowed from the school library. The high school had a better piano in the auditorium, not new by any means, but less worn than the elementary school one. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, the janitor, Mr. Thompson, an elderly man with kind eyes and a slight limp, would let her into the auditorium during lunch. "You keep at it, girl," he would say with a nod. "My daddy used to say that anything worth doing is worth doing until your fingers bleed." Lena never told her parents about the piano. What was the point? They couldn't afford lessons or an instrument at home. Besides, in their world, music wasn't a path forward. It was a luxury they couldn't afford to dream about. The other students didn't understand either. The few times someone had walked into the auditorium while she was playing, the reaction had been the same: confused looks followed by poorly hidden smirks. "What's Piano Girl doing today?" They would whisper loud enough for her to hear. "Practicing for her big concert at Carnegie Hall?" The laughter that followed always stung, but not enough to make her stop. One day during her sophomore year, the school counselor, Mrs. Patel, happened to walk by the auditorium and heard Lena playing. "I didn't know we had any students who could play like that," she said, approaching the piano with genuine interest. "Who's been teaching you?" Lena's cheeks flushed. "No one, really. I just practice when I can." Mrs. Patel's eyebrows rose. "You taught yourself to play like that?" Lena shrugged, uncomfortable with the attention. "Have you ever had proper lessons?" Mrs. Patel asked. "No, ma'am. We can't really. I mean, it's just a hobby." Mrs. Patel seemed to understand immediately. She sat down on the bench beside Lena. "I have a friend, Valerie Chen. She used to teach at the community college before she retired. I think she might be interested in meeting you." Lena's heart skipped a beat, but reality quickly dampened her excitement. "I can't pay for lessons." "Let me talk to her," Mrs. Patel insisted. "There are always options." 2 weeks later, Lena found herself standing on the porch of a small house with a well-tended garden. Her palms were sweaty as she knocked on the door. Mrs. Chen was nothing like Lena had imagined. Instead of a stern, formal teacher, she was a petite woman in her 60s with short gray hair and a ready smile. Her living room contained not one but two pianos, a grand piano that dominated the space and a smaller upright against the wall. "Mrs. Patel tells me you've been teaching yourself," she said, gesturing for Lena to sit at the upright. "Show me what you can do." Lena's hands trembled as she placed them on the keys. This piano was far better than the school's, with keys that responded to the lightest touch. She began to play a simple piece she had perfected, then switched to something more complicated that she'd been working on. When she finished, Mrs. Chen was silent for a long moment. Lena braced herself for disappointment. "You have a natural gift," Mrs. Chen finally said. "But natural gifts are just the beginning. The question is, how badly do you want this?" "More than anything," Lena answered without hesitation. Mrs. Chen nodded. "I'll teach you, but I don't give free lessons. Nothing valuable comes without cost." Lena's heart sank. "I understand. Thank you for your time." "I didn't say the cost was money," Mrs. Chen interrupted. "I need help around the house. My arthritis makes certain tasks difficult. 3 hours of help each week in exchange for 1 hour of lessons. Is that acceptable?" The arrangement was perfect. On Saturdays, Lena would arrive early to clean, help with laundry, and tend to the garden. Then for 1 glorious hour she would receive proper instruction. Mrs. Chen was a demanding teacher. "Again," she would say after Lena played a piece. "Your fingers need to be stronger. Your timing needs to be more precise. Music isn't just about playing notes. It's about making them breathe." At school, Lena's secret life remained just that, a secret. She never mentioned her lessons or her growing skill. What was the point? In the hierarchy of Pine Creek High School, playing classical piano ranked somewhere below watching paint dry. The few students who knew about her piano thing made sure she understood how they felt about it. "Hey, piano girl," called out Josh, the star quarterback, one day when he found her in the auditorium. His friends gathered around him, already smiling in anticipation. "Play something cool for once. You know, actual music." "Yeah," added his girlfriend, the head cheerleader whose designer clothes cost more than Lena's family spent on groceries in a month. "Nobody wants to hear that boring classical stuff. It's so ancient." Lena kept her eyes down as they walked closer to the piano. "My 5-year-old cousin takes piano lessons," another boy said. "He's probably better than you." The laughter cut deep, but Lena had learned to build walls around her heart. She gathered her sheet music and stood up. "Sorry," she muttered. "I was just leaving." As she walked past them, Josh pressed a random set of keys, creating a harsh, discordant sound. "Sounds about the same to me," he joked, and his friends laughed again. Later that day, Lena sat across from Mrs. Chen, her hand still as the older woman poured tea. "Why do you play, Lena?" Mrs. Chen asked suddenly. The question caught her off guard. "Because I love it. That's not enough," Mrs. Chen said firmly. "Love is the beginning, not the end. You must play because the music lives inside you and demands to be heard. Because without it, something essential would be missing from the world." Lena thought about the laughter, the snide comments, the looks that made her feel small. "What if no one wants to hear it?" she asked quietly. Mrs. Chen smiled. "The right people will. And even if they don't, you play for yourself first. The rest will follow." That night, as Lena lay in bed listening to her father's snoring and the distant sound of her mother washing dishes, she made a promise to herself. One day they would hear her. Really hear her. And the laughter would stop. What she didn't know then was just how soon that day would come. Winter came early that year to Pine Creek, bringing with it shorter days and a biting cold that seeped through the thin walls of the Rodriguez home. Lena had taken to wearing fingerless gloves around the house, keeping her hands warm while leaving her fingers free to move. She would practice on the kitchen table when her family was out, her fingers dancing across the wooden surface as if it were ivory keys. "What are you doing?" her younger brother Miguel asked one afternoon, catching her mid-performance on their kitchen table. Lena's hands froze. "Nothing," she said too quickly. Miguel tilted his head, his curious eyes watching her. At 12, he was at that age where nothing escaped his notice. "Doesn't look like nothing," he said, dropping his backpack on a chair. "Looks like you're playing piano without a piano." Lena sighed. Miguel was the one person she couldn't fool. "Fine, yes, I'm practicing." But we don't have a piano. I play at school and... Somewhere else, Miguel's eyes widened. You have secret piano lessons. Does Mom know? No, Lena said firmly. And she doesn't need to. She and Dad have enough to worry about. But, Miguel, she said, kneeling down to his level. This is important to me. Really important. Can you keep a secret? He considered this, his face serious beyond his years. Finally he nodded. Only if you play for me someday. A real piano, not the table, Lena smiled. Deal. The next morning she arrived at school an hour early as usual. Mr. Thompson, true to his word, had left the auditorium door unlocked for her. The space was empty and quiet, the rows of seats like silent witnesses to her morning ritual. The winter sunlight filtered weakly through the high windows as Lena sat at the piano. She started with scales to warm up her fingers, which were stiff from the cold walk to school. Gradually, the familiar exercises loosened her hands, and she moved on to the piece she'd been working on with Mrs. Chen, Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. The opening notes filled the empty auditorium, hesitant at first, then growing more confident as she lost herself in the music. Mrs. Chen had taught her to feel the piece, not just play it. Your fingers know the notes, she'd said. Now let your heart speak through them. Lena closed her eyes, letting the melody flow through her. She didn't hear the auditorium door open or notice the figure standing in the shadows at the back of the room. When the final notes faded away, a voice broke the silence. I didn't know anyone would be in here. Lena jumped, spinning around on the bench. A girl stood halfway down the aisle, hugging a binder to her chest. Lena recognized her vaguely, a new student who had transferred to Pine Creek High a few weeks ago. Sorry, Lena mumbled, already gathering her sheet music. I was just leaving. No, please don't, the girl said, walking closer. That was beautiful. I've never heard anyone play like that in person before. Lena paused, uncertain. She was used to mockery, not praise. I'm Zoe, the girl said, stopping a few feet from the piano. I just moved here from Portland. My mom got a job at the hospital. Lena, she replied, still wary. Do you play here every morning? Lena nodded. Would you mind if I listened sometimes? Zoe asked. I used to take violin lessons back home, but, well, we had to leave a lot behind when we moved. Something about the way she said it made Lena think she wasn't just talking about a violin. I guess that would be okay, Lena said slowly. Zoe smiled, and for the first time since arriving at Pine Creek High, Lena felt like she might have found someone who understood. Over the next few weeks, a routine developed. Lena would arrive early to practice, and Zoe would slip quietly into one of the back seats to listen. Sometimes they'd talk afterward, about music mostly, but also about classes and the strange, unwritten rules of Pine Creek High. How come you never play during music class? Zoe asked one day as they walked to their first period. Lena shrugged. Mr. Benson teaches band. He's not interested in classical piano. But you're so good. Don't the other kids know? Some do, Lena said, her voice tightening. They think it's stupid, Zoe looked incredulous. Are you serious? Because you can play Chopin? That's like making fun of someone for being able to speak French. Lena laughed despite herself. Welcome to Pine Creek, where being different isn't exactly celebrated. Well, they're idiots, Zoe declared firmly. Mrs. Chen noticed the change in Lena at their next lesson. Your playing has more confidence today, she observed, her sharp eyes missing nothing. Something's different, Lena told her about Zoe. Ah, Mrs. Chen nodded. An audience changes everything, even an audience of one. She doesn't just listen, Lena explained. She understands, Mrs. Chen smiled. Then she is rare indeed. Now let's work on the Bach piece. Your left hand is still hesitating on the 16th notes. As winter slowly gave way to spring, Lena's skills grew by leaps and bounds. Mrs. Chen pushed her harder than ever, assigning more difficult pieces and insisting on perfect timing and expression. You have a gift, she told Lena one Saturday after a particularly good lesson. But gifts need to be shaped, refined, like a diamond that needs cutting to show its brilliance. Lena soaked up every word, every correction, every bit of praise. For the first time, she allowed herself to dream bigger. Maybe there was a future for her beyond Pine Creek. Maybe music could be more than a secret passion. At home, things were tense. Her father had been laid off when the orchard owner decided to use a harvesting machine instead of workers. Money was tighter than ever. We'll manage, her mother assured them over beans and rice for the third night in a row. Your father has another job interview tomorrow. Lena thought about the small amount of money she'd saved from babysitting on weekends when she wasn't at Mrs. Chen's. It wasn't much, but it might help with groceries. I have some money saved, she offered. For bills or whatever. Her father's face darkened. No, that's your school money. For college, but no arguments, Lena, he said firmly. We don't take money from our children. Later that night, she heard her parents talking in low voices in the kitchen. We could ask your brother for help, her mother suggested. I'm not taking handouts, her father replied. I'll find work. It's not a handout if it's family. 3 more days. If I don't have a job by then, we'll talk about it. Lena lay awake long after their voices fell silent. The weight of their struggle pressed down on her. How could she justify spending hours at a piano when her family was worrying about putting food on the table? The next morning, for the first time in months, she didn't go to school early to practice. Instead, she went to the local diner and asked if they needed help. The manager, a tired-looking woman with faded blonde hair, looked her up and down. You ever waited tables before? No, but I'm a quick learner, Lena said. We need someone for the breakfast shift. 6 to 10 before school, 5 days a week. Think you can handle that? Lena thought about her morning practice sessions, about Mrs. Chen's lessons, about the progress she'd made. Yes, she said. I can do that. When Zoe found her at lunch, Lena explained about the job. But what about practicing? Zoe asked, concern clear on her face. I'll figure something out, Lena said. But the truth was she wasn't sure how. That afternoon, she went to Mrs. Chen's house, dreading the conversation they needed to have. To her surprise, Mrs. Chen took the news calmly. Life often places obstacles in our path, she said, pouring tea as if they were discussing the weather, rather than the potential end of Lena's piano lessons. The question is whether we see them as dead ends or detours. I don't have a choice, Lena said. My family needs the money. I understand responsibility to family, Mrs. Chen said. Better than you might think. She was quiet for a moment, seemingly lost in thought. We will adapt. You can come after your shift on Saturdays, and perhaps one evening during the week? Lena felt a surge of relief. You're not angry? Mrs. Chen smiled. Angry? No. Disappointed that life is hard? Always, but never at you, Lena. The next few weeks tested Lena's determination like never before. She would rise at 5:30, walk to the diner in the pre-dawn darkness, work until school started, then drag herself through classes, often fighting to keep her eyes open. Her practice time shrank to stolen moments, half an hour after school before the janitor needed to lock up, one evening at Mrs. Chen's and Saturday afternoons. Her progress slowed, but it didn't stop. You look tired, Zoe commented one day as they sat together at lunch. I'm fine, Lena insisted, though the dark circles under her eyes told a different story. You can't keep this up forever, Zoe said. Something has to give. Lena knew she was right, but what choice did she have? Her father had found some work. Not enough, but something. Her waitressing money helped with groceries and bills, and as exhausted as she was, she couldn't bear the thought of giving up the piano completely. What she didn't know was that fate was about to offer an unexpected turning point, one that would test not only her skill but her courage as well. Spring arrived in Pine Creek, with a burst of wildflowers and the sweet smell of apple blossoms from the surrounding orchards. For Lena, the changing season brought little relief. Between school, her job at the diner, and her precious few hours of piano practice, she barely noticed the world turning green again. One unusually warm Monday morning in April, Lena dragged herself through the diner's back door at 5:55 a.m. Her arms felt heavy, her eyes gritty from too little sleep. You look like death warmed over, commented Dot, the cook, a heavy-set woman with a booming laugh and hands that could crack eggs with lightning speed. Thanks, Lena replied, tying her apron with practiced movements. Just what every girl wants to hear. I'm serious, kiddo. You're running yourself into the ground. Lena managed a tired smile. I'll sleep when I'm dead. Or after graduation. Whichever comes first. Dot shook her head, but there was concern in her eyes. Your section's already filling up. Monday morning crowd's always grumpy. The breakfast rush was particularly brutal that day. A tour bus had broken down at the edge of town, and half the passengers had found their way to the diner. By the time Lena's shift ended, she was 15 minutes late for school and running on empty. She slipped into her first period class, ignoring the teacher's pointed look, and collapsed into her seat next to Zoe. "You okay?" Zoe whispered, sliding her notes over so Lena could copy what she'd missed. "Fine," Lena whispered back, the word automatic by now. After class, Zoe pulled her aside in the hallway. "You need to see this," she said, thrusting a bright yellow flyer into Lena's hands. Lena looked down at the paper. "Young Artist Competition," she read aloud. So it's perfect for you," Zoe said, her eyes bright with excitement. "First prize is $5,000. The amount made Lena's head spin. $5,000 would cover so many bills, maybe even help with community college tuition. "The competition is in 6 weeks, Zoe continued, "and it's open to anyone between 16 and 25 who lives within 100 miles. "I can't enter a music competition," Lena said, handing the flyer back. "I've never even performed in public, except for me," Zoe pointed out. "And Mrs. Chen. That's different. You're safe." Zoe pushed the flyer back into Lena's hands. "Just think about it. Talk to Mrs. Chen at least. She'll tell you if you're ready." Lena folded the paper and tucked it into her backpack, more to end the conversation than anything else. But throughout the day, her mind kept returning to those $5,000. What could her family do with that kind of money? What could she do? That evening, she showed the flyer to Mrs. Chen, expecting her teacher to dismiss the idea immediately. Instead, Mrs. Chen studied the paper carefully, her expression thoughtful. "This is a prestigious competition," she said. "The judges are well respected in the classical music community." "I can't possibly be good enough," Lena said. Mrs. Chen fixed her with a sharp look. "After all this time, you still underestimate yourself." She set the flyer on the piano. "Play the Chopin Nocturne for me." Lena positioned her hands over the keys, took a deep breath, and began to play. The familiar piece flowed from her fingers, the notes rising and falling like a gentle tide. When she finished, she looked up at Mrs. Chen. "Again," Mrs. Chen said, "but this time close your eyes. Don't think about the keys. Think about what the music is saying." Lena obeyed, letting her fingers find the keys by memory while she focused on the emotion of the piece, the longing, the quiet passion, the moments of both joy and melancholy. When the final note faded, she opened her eyes to find Mrs. Chen watching her intently. "You are ready," her teacher said simply. "But there will be contestants from music schools, people who've been playing their whole lives. And none of them will play with your heart," Mrs. Chen interrupted. "Technical skill can be learned by anyone willing to put in the hours. What cannot be taught is the ability to make the piano sing with your soul." Lena looked down at her hands, calloused from work, the nails cut short for playing. "I don't even have a proper piece to perform. The competition requires a 10-minute program. We have 6 weeks, Mrs. Chen said, already pulling sheet music from her collection. We'll need to rearrange your practice schedule. Focus entirely on your competition pieces." "I don't know if I can," Lena said, thinking of her job, her family's needs. Mrs. Chen sat beside her on the bench. "Lena, listen to me. Some opportunities come once in a lifetime. This may be yours." That night, Lena couldn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. Could she really do this? Enter a real competition, play in front of judges and audience? The thought made her stomach clench with fear. But beneath the fear was a flicker of something else. A tiny, fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, her music could be more than a secret joy. That it could actually change her life. The next morning, she approached her manager at the diner. "I need to cut back my hours," she said, her heart hammering. "Just for 6 weeks. I can still work weekends, but I need the weekday mornings for something important," the manager frowned. "I rely on you for those shifts, Lena. I know. And I wouldn't ask if it wasn't really important." After a long moment, the manager sighed. "Fine, 6 weeks. But I'll need you back full-time after that." Lena nodded, relief flooding through her. "Thank you. I promise I'll make it up to you." With her mornings free again, Lena threw herself into preparing for the competition with an intensity that surprised even Mrs. Chen. Every spare minute was dedicated to practicing her program. A Bach prelude, the Chopin Nocturne, and a challenging piece by Debussy that stretched her abilities to their limit. "Your hands are too tense," Mrs. Chen would say, watching her struggle with a difficult passage. "You're trying to control the music instead of letting it flow through you." Lena would shake out her hands, roll her shoulders, and try again. And again. And again. At school, she became even more withdrawn, her mind constantly occupied with phrases of music, fingering patterns, the rise and fall of dynamics. Only Zoe seemed to understand, bringing her lunch when Lena forgot to eat, covering for her when she dozed off in class. "You're going to win," Zoe said with absolute conviction one afternoon as they sat in the empty auditorium. "I can feel it," Lena smiled weakly. "I'll be happy if I don't throw up on stage or forget everything halfway through." "You won't," Zoe insisted. "You're going to be amazing." As the competition drew closer, word began to spread around school. Lena hadn't told anyone except Zoe, but somehow people found out. "Heard piano girl thinks she's going to win some fancy music contest," Josh said loudly as Lena passed him in the hallway. His friend snickered. Maybe they give prizes for trying really hard. Lena kept walking, her face burning but her step unfaltering. There was a time when comments like that would have crushed her. Now they barely registered. She had bigger things to worry about. At home, she finally told her parents about the competition. Her mother's eyes filled with tears. $5,000? She repeated in Spanish. "Dios mío, don't get your hopes up," Lena cautioned. "The chances of me winning are very small." Her father, who had been silent, finally spoke. "But there is a chance." Lena nodded. "Then you must try," he said firmly. "Nothing is gained without risk." The night before the competition, Lena couldn't eat. Her stomach was tied in knots, her hands shaking slightly whenever she thought about the next day. Mrs. Chen had arranged for Lena to practice on the competition piano for 1 hour that evening. The community college auditorium where the event would be held was intimidatingly large, with rows of seats stretching back into shadows. "It's so big," Lena whispered as they walked down the center aisle. "Focus only on the piano," Mrs. Chen advised. "Nothing else exists when you play." The grand piano on stage was the most beautiful instrument Lena had ever seen, a gleaming black Steinway with keys that responded to the lightest touch. She played through her program once, adjusting to the piano's action, the acoustics of the room. When she finished, Mrs. Chen nodded in satisfaction. "Remember what we discussed. Technical perfection is not your goal. Connection is. Make them feel what you feel." That night, Lena dreamed of floating keys and endless music that shifted and changed like water. She woke before dawn, her heart already racing. Today was the day. Zoe arrived at her house at 8, carrying a garment bag. "My mom's dress," she explained. "She said it would bring you luck." The dress was simple but elegant, dark blue with a modest neckline and a skirt that fell just below the knee. When Lena tried it on, she hardly recognized herself in the mirror. "You look like a real pianist," her brother Miguel said, his eyes wide. Lena smiled nervously. "I guess today we find out if I am one." Mrs. Chen was waiting for them at the auditorium, her normally calm expression tinged with excitement. "You're in the second group," she told Lena. "You'll perform just before lunch." As they walked into the warm-up area, Lena saw the other contestants for the first time. Young men and women in formal attire, some pacing nervously, others sitting perfectly still with closed eyes, mental rehearsals playing in their minds. Lena felt suddenly, painfully out of place. These people belonged here. They had probably been performing since they were children, had teachers from prestigious music schools, owned their own pianos. "I can't do this," she whispered to Mrs. Chen. "They'll laugh at me." Mrs. Chen took her hands firmly. "No, they won't laugh. They might dismiss you before you play. They might underestimate you because you come from a small town, because you haven't had years of formal training. But the moment you touch those keys, Lena, they will know." "Know what?" "That music doesn't care where you came from. It only cares where you're going." The community college auditorium buzzed with nervous energy. Parents, teachers, and music lovers filled the seats while contestants paced in the hallways, some playing air piano with their eyes closed, others sitting perfectly still as if movement might break their concentration. Lena found a quiet corner backstage and tried to steady her breathing. Her hands felt cold. She rubbed them together, trying to warm her fingers. Around her, the other contestants seemed so confident, so at home in this world of competitions and performances. A tall young man in a perfectly tailored suit walked past, barely glancing at her. His sheet music was bound in leather, a stark contrast to Lena's pages held together with a paperclip. From a nearby practice room, she heard fragments of the same Debussy piece she would be playing, only faster, more technically perfect. Doubt crept in like a shadow. What was she doing here? These people had been preparing their whole lives for moments like this. She'd been playing on a school piano, snatching practice time whenever she could. "Stop it," she whispered to herself, clenching her hands into fists. "You belong here as much as anyone." But the knot in her stomach tightened when a woman with a clipboard approached. "You're Lena Rodriguez?" the woman asked, checking her list. Lena nodded. "You're sixth in your group, about 45 minutes from now." 45 minutes, the time seemed both impossibly distant and terrifyingly near. "Is there a place I can warm up?" Lena asked. "Practice rooms are down that hall, but they're all taken," the woman replied, already moving on to the next contestant. Lena found a folding chair against the wall and sat down. She placed her hands on her knees, going through her pieces in her mind, her fingers moving slightly as she imagined the keys. Nervous? Lena looked up to see a girl about her age standing nearby, dressed in a deep purple dress that looked both expensive and comfortable. "A little," Lena admitted. The girl smiled. "Me too. I'm throwing up in my head right now." She held out her hand. "I'm Vanessa." "Lena," she replied, shaking Vanessa's hand. "First competition?" Lena nodded. "You'll be fine," Vanessa said. "Just remember, the judges are people too. They want you to do well." "Have you done many of these?" Lena asked. 7 so far. 1, 2, bombed one completely. Forgot the middle section of my Bach and had to skip ahead. Vanessa laughed at the memory. "I thought my teacher would disown me." "What happened?" "Nothing," she said. "Learn from it and move on." So I did. Vanessa glanced at her watch. "I'm up in 10 minutes. Better go center myself or whatever." "Good luck," Lena called after her. "You too. Maybe we'll see each other in the finals." Lena smiled, but the mention of finals sent another jolt of anxiety through her. One step at a time, she reminded herself. Just get through the preliminaries. She closed her eyes again, trying to focus, but a burst of laughter from nearby broke her concentration. A group of contestants were gathered in a small cluster, and something about their stance reminded her of the popular kids at school, the ones who always seemed to move through life with ease, untroubled by doubt. "Are you kidding me?" one of them was saying. "She's playing the Chopin E-flat Nocturne. That's like what we all played when we were 12. "Maybe she's really good at it," another suggested. "Doesn't matter. The judges want to see technical skill. You need to choose pieces that show range." Lena realized with a sinking feeling that they were talking about her program. The competition schedule had been posted, listing each contestant's selections. She hadn't thought to check what others were playing. A young man with curly hair shrugged. "My teacher says judges are bored of hearing the same difficult pieces played mediocrely. Better to play something simpler really well." "Yeah, well, your teacher isn't Curtis Institute faculty, is he?" Lena stood up and walked away, their voices fading behind her. It didn't matter what they thought. Mrs. Chen had approved her program. That was enough. She found Zoe and her parents sitting in the audience when she peeked through the stage door curtain. They'd taken time off work to be here. Her father had even worn his one good shirt, the one he saved for church. Next to them sat Mrs. Chen, her back straight, her expression serene. Seeing them all there together made Lena's chest tighten with emotion. The backstage coordinator found her 15 minutes later. "You're up after the next performer," she said. "Wait in the wings until they call your name." Lena nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. From the wings, she watched a boy around her age finish a fiery piece that had his fingers flying across the keys in a blur. The audience applauded, enthusiastically, and he bowed with practiced grace before exiting the stage on the opposite side. Next, we have Lena Rodriguez performing Bach's Prelude in C major, Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, and Debussy's Clair de Lune, announced a voice over the speakers. Her legs felt wooden as she walked to center stage. The grand piano waited, its lid raised like an enormous black wing. The audience was a blur of faces, the stage lights warm on her skin. She forced herself to breathe, to focus only on the piano as Mrs. Chen had taught her. Lena sat on the bench, adjusting it slightly. The keys gleamed, inviting her touch. She placed her hands in her lap, took one more deep breath and began. The Bach flowed from her fingers cleanly, precisely. She felt a moment of pride at the steadiness of her hands, the clarity of each note. As the final chord of the prelude faded, she paused, shifting mental gears for the Chopin. The nocturne was like an old friend, comfortable and familiar. She leaned into the melody, letting it rise and fall with the natural breathing of the piece. This was why she played, for moments like this when the music seemed to come not from the piano, but from somewhere inside her. When it came time for the Debussy, Lena hesitated for just a fraction of a second. This was the piece that had given her the most trouble, with its delicate passages and subtle shifts in mood. She thought of the countless hours she'd spent on it, Mrs. Chen's patient guidance, the times she'd fallen asleep with the notes still running through her head. The opening notes hung in the air like drops of moonlight. She moved through the piece carefully at first, then with growing confidence. The world beyond the piano disappeared. There was only the music, the keys beneath her fingers, the sound filling the space around her. As the final notes of Clair de Lune faded away, Lena became aware of a strange sound, or rather, the absence of sound. The auditorium was completely silent. For a terrifying moment, she thought something had gone wrong. Had she made a terrible mistake without realizing it? Then the applause began, scattered at first, then building. She rose from the bench and turned to face the audience, her legs trembling slightly. She bowed as Mrs. Chen had taught her, a simple dip from the waist. As she straightened, she caught sight of her family. Her mother was openly crying. Her father, standing with his hands pressed together as if in prayer. Zoe was beaming, giving her 2 thumbs up. And Mrs. Chen, stoic, demanding Mrs. Chen, was smiling with unmistakable pride. Backstage, Lena found herself surrounded by the other contestants from her group. The tall young man in the suit nodded to her. "Nice Debussy," he said simply. Vanessa squeezed her arm. "Told you you'd be fine. That was beautiful." "Thanks," Lena managed, still riding the wave of adrenaline. The rest of the day passed in a blur. More performances, lunch that she couldn't eat, waiting for results. When the finalists were announced, Lena heard her name called third. She'd made it to the final round. Mrs. Chen found her in the hallway afterward. "Your Bach was precise, your Chopin emotional, your Debussy." She paused. "Your Debussy had soul. Now for the finals you must bring all 3 qualities together." "I can't believe I made it," Lena said. "I can," Mrs. Chen replied. "Now go home and rest. Tomorrow will be even more challenging." That night, Lena lay awake, replaying her performance in her mind. She'd done well, better than she'd expected, but the finals would be different. The judges would be looking for something more, something beyond technical skill or emotional connection. Her mother knocked softly on her door. "May I come in?" Lena sat up. "Of course." Her mother sat on the edge of the bed. "I didn't understand," she said in Spanish. "All these years I thought you were I didn't know you could play like that." "I've been practicing a long time," Lena said. "Why didn't you tell us? We would have found a way to help to get you lessons sooner." Lena took her mother's hand. "You and Papa work so hard, you have enough to worry about." Her mother's eyes filled with tears. "That's not how family works, mija. Your dreams matter too." She squeezed Lena's hand. "Tomorrow you go and play like you did today. Show them who you are." The next morning dawned clear and cool. Lena arrived at the auditorium early, determined to find a practice room this time. To her surprise, Mrs. Chen was already waiting in the lobby. "I've arranged for you to use the practice piano in the music department," she said. 1 hour just to warm up." The practice room was small but private, with a decent upright piano. Lena ran through parts of her program, focusing on the transitions, the moments where she needed to shift from one piece to another. For the finals, each contestant would perform their entire program without pauses, creating a continuous musical experience. It was a test of endurance as much as skill. When she returned to the auditorium, she found it even more crowded than the day before. Word had spread about the competition, and more people from the community had come to listen. As she made her way backstage, she heard a familiar voice. "Well, if it isn't Piano Girl." Lena turned to see Josh and two of his friends standing near the stage door. Her heart sank. What were they doing here? "Zoe told everyone you made it to the finals," he said. "Had to see for myself." "You came to watch me play?" Lena asked, confused. "More like we came to watch you crash and burn," one of his friends said with a smirk. "No offense, but these people are like professional musicians." Lena should have felt angry or hurt, but instead, a strange calm settled over her. "You know what? A week ago, that might have bothered me. But today, I really don't care what you think." Josh looked taken aback. "Whatever. Good luck, I guess." "Thanks," Lena said. "I won't need it." She walked away, her step lighter than before. Nothing they said could touch her now. She had already proven to herself that she belonged here. Whatever happened in the finals was just the next step in her journey. The day of the finals dawned bright and clear. Lena woke before her alarm, her mind already racing with fragments of music and the memory of applause. She lay still for a moment, looking at the ceiling of her small bedroom, listening to the familiar sounds of her house, her father's heavy footsteps in the kitchen, the hiss of the old coffee maker, her brother's radio playing softly through the thin wall. Today everything would change, one way or another. She dressed carefully in Zoe's mother's blue dress, her fingers steady as she fastened the buttons. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Gone was the shy girl who had hidden her passion for years. In her place stood someone new, someone who had found her voice through music. Her mother gasped softly when Lena walked into the kitchen. "Mia," she said, her hand over her heart. "You look beautiful." Her father, not usually a man of many words, nodded in agreement. "Like a real musician," he said, his voice rough with emotion. Miguel, still in his pajamas, looked up from his cereal. "Are you going to win today?" Lena smiled at her little brother. "I'm going to play my best. That's all I can do." "That's enough," her father said firmly. "Whatever happens, we are proud." Mrs. Chen was waiting when they arrived at the community college, her usual calm demeanor slightly betrayed by the rapid tapping of her fingers against her purse. "How are you feeling?" she asked Lena. "Ready?" Lena replied, surprising herself with how true it felt. Mrs. Chen nodded. "Remember what we discussed yesterday? In the finals, the judges are looking not just for technical skill or emotional expression, but for artistry, that special quality that transforms notes on a page into something more." "I understand," Lena said. The backstage area was quieter today. Only 8 finalists remained, each lost in their own thoughts as they prepared for their performances. Lena found a corner and closed her eyes, mentally walking through her program one more time. A hand touched her shoulder. She looked up to see Vanessa, resplendent in a red dress. "Ready to blow them away?" Vanessa asked with a grin. "I hope so," Lena replied. "You?" "Born ready," Vanessa said, though her smile wavered slightly. "Though between you and me, I didn't sleep a wink last night. My teacher keeps saying this competition could open doors for me. Music schools, scholarships. It's a lot of pressure." Lena nodded in understanding. "What will you do? If you win, I mean." Vanessa's expression grew serious. "Apply to Juilliard. It's been the dream since I was 6. She tilted her head, studying Lena. "What about you? I don't think I've seen you at any of the regional competitions before." "This is my first," Lena admitted. "Seriously?" Vanessa looked impressed. "And you made the finals?" "That's wow." Before Lena could respond, the stage manager appeared. "Places, everyone. We're starting in 5 minutes." The finalists gathered in the wings, tension visible in their rigid postures and darting eyes. Lena found herself 4th in the lineup, right after Vanessa and before the tall young man in the suit. The auditorium had filled to capacity overnight. News of a particularly strong group of finalists had spread through the local music community, bringing teachers, students, and music lovers from across the region. As Lena peeked through the curtain, she could see every seat occupied, people even standing along the back wall. Her family had better seats today, front row, along with Mrs. Chen. She spotted Zoe a few rows back, sitting with her mother. To her surprise, she also saw Dot from the diner, Mr. Thompson, the janitor, and even a few students from school, including Josh and his friends. One by one, the finalists performed. First, a serious girl with glasses whose Beethoven sonata rang through the hall with crystal clarity. Next, a boy who tackled Liszt with fiery intensity, his hands a blur over the keys. Then Vanessa, whose program of Bach, Schubert, and Prokofiev showcased her remarkable range. When her name was called, Lena walked onto the stage with measured steps, the way Mrs. Chen had taught her. The lights seemed brighter today, the audience larger, the piano more imposing. She adjusted the bench, placed her hands in her lap, and took a deep breath. The first notes of Bach's Prelude in C major filled the hall. Simple, clean, precise. As she moved seamlessly into Chopin's Nocturne, she felt a familiar calm settle over her. The keys beneath her fingers were no longer ivory and ebony, but extensions of her hands, her heart. By the time she reached the Debussy, she was no longer playing the piano. She was simply allowing the music to flow through her. With each phrase, each carefully shaped crescendo and diminuendo, she told her story, the years of secret practice, the doubt, the determination, the moments of pure joy when the music came alive under her hands. She poured everything into those minutes on stage, holding nothing back. As the final notes of Clair de Lune faded into silence, Lena kept her hands on the keys for a moment longer, reluctant to break the spell. Then she stood and faced the audience. The silence lasted for 3 heartbeats. Then applause erupted, not polite appreciation but genuine enthusiasm that swelled until it filled every corner of the auditorium. In the front row, her mother wiped tears from her face. Her father stood, his weathered hands coming together again and again. Mrs. Chen's usual reserve had cracked completely. She was smiling broadly, nodding as if to say, "Yes, this is what we worked for." Lena bowed, her heart so full it felt like it might burst from her chest. As she walked off stage, the applause continued, following her like a wave. Backstage, Vanessa grabbed her hands. "That was incredible," she said, her eyes wide. "You made me cry, and I never cry." Even the tall young man in the suit nodded to her with new respect. "Well played," he said simply. The remaining finalists performed, each bringing their own interpretation to their chosen pieces. Then came the waiting, the endless, agonizing waiting as the judges deliberated. Lena sat with her family in the lobby, too nervous to speak. Her father's arm around her shoulders was a steady comfort. Zoe paced back and forth, unable to contain her energy. "No matter what happens," Mrs. Chen said, "you have already succeeded beyond what most achieve in years of playing." After what seemed like hours, they were called back into the auditorium for the results. The 8 finalists stood in a line on stage, faces composed but hands betraying their nerves. A finger tapping against a leg, hands clasped too tightly, a sleeve being worried between thumb and forefinger. The head judge, a distinguished woman with silver hair swept into an elegant bun, approached the microphone. "Before I announce the winners," she said, "I want to express the panel's appreciation for the remarkable level of talent we've witnessed today. Each finalist has demonstrated not just technical skill, but a deep understanding of the music they've chosen to share with us." She picked up an envelope from the judges' table. The third prize, with an award of $1,000, goes to... Lena held her breath. "Vanessa Taylor." Vanessa stepped forward, beaming as she accepted her certificate and shook the judge's hand. The second prize, with an award of $2,000, goes to... The auditorium was utterly silent. "Benjamin Chen." The tall young man in the suit nodded with satisfaction as he claimed his prize. Only first place remained. Lena's heart pounded so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. She had already come further than she'd ever dreamed possible. Standing on this stage, being counted among these talented musicians, that was already a victory beyond measure. And the first prize, with an award of $5,000, goes to... The judge paused, looking at each remaining finalist in turn. Lena Rodriguez. For a moment, Lena couldn't move. The words didn't seem real. It was only when Vanessa nudged her forward that her legs remembered how to work. As if in a dream, she walked to center stage. The judge placed the certificate in her hands, saying something about exceptional musicality and rare emotional depth, but the words washed over her in a blur. She looked out at the audience, at her mother and father holding each other, both crying openly now. at Miguel jumping up and down, at Mrs. Chen standing perfectly still, her face transformed by pride, at Zoe screaming and applauding, at the diner's cook Dot wiping her eyes with her apron, at Josh and his friends, their expressions a mixture of shock and reluctant admiration. Later, there would be time to think about what this meant. The money, the recognition, the possibilities that had suddenly opened before her, but in this moment all Lena felt was the pure, overwhelming joy of being heard, really heard. As the ceremony ended and people began to file out of the auditorium, Lena found herself drawn back to the piano. The stage was empty now, the lights dimmed. She sat at the bench one last time, placing her hands on the keys without pressing them. "Thank you," she whispered. Then she played, not Bach or Chopin or Debussy, but a simple melody that had been forming in her mind all day, her own music rising from her fingers for the first time. In the shadows at the back of the hall, Mrs. Chen listened, a smile playing at her lips. This was just the beginning. The girl who had once practiced on a kitchen table was now composing at a concert grand. The world that had once seemed so distant was now opening its doors, and Lena, her fingers dancing across the keys in the half-light, was ready to step through. 6 years later, when she returned to Pine Creek to give a concert at the high school auditorium, people would line up around the block for tickets.